The entity and neural net that I created inside of Unreal Engine 5, it is intended to have an evolving entity that finds its place in this green square. This green square eventually will be able to be changed to wherever. And I'd love to add food and different characteristics and stuff to these entities later on, energy, reproduction cycles. But for now, these entities are simply on an automated timer. Um, this is the map. It's just a big red square with the green square in the middle. This is the reproduction zone, and this is the kill zone. So, before I start and show you this simulation, here is the entities. They just spawn as balls with randomly given traits. Um, for example, this one has the input traits of 4, 9, 4, 6, and 5, and each input trait relates directly to the index of the output trait if it returns as true. So if 4's input trait returned true, then it would execute the action stored within output trait 2. Um, and so on and so forth. You can change the amount of output traits and input traits an entity has by changing it in the code. So here I'm going to show you, well, real quick before we do that, let's show you what the spawner is doing right now. So if we play, it's just a rock right now because it was a free asset. I didn't want to create anything for it until I knew what I was doing a little better. There we go. So every, I think it's 900 ticks, it will spawn 10 entities that are randomly generated and have random traits and random input traits and random output traits. It looks like this blue one actually. Oh, I was wrong. But I thought maybe it would be able to survive for a while. This blue one and this white one. Um, the perfect entity would have, for this specific square, would walk into the square, have long enough eyesight to where it sees that back wall and stops, and then when it has collisions with other things, it's not moving left or right or anything like that. That's the perfect trait or perfect entity. And as you can see, as these white ones continue to be found inside the green square, every time that respawn happens, it spawns two of those white entities instead of just getting rid of them. But all the other ones that didn't survive, they are not respawned. We'll go ahead and exit this real quick. Those green rays that you saw coming off the entities, those are just debug lines. They show the eyesight of each entity, how far they can see, and the ray cast that they're doing to check for collisions and check what is in front of them and what's to the sides of them and things like that. So if we take a look at our code here, there's a lot of code here, so I won't go through all of it. But essentially we have a spawner, and the spawner spawns an entity whenever it's called. Spawn entity from parent respawns an entity, and spawn entity will spawn a random entity. The spawner is the location in which the entities are spawned from. For us, it's just this little see-through box right here. All the entities are spawned at the same location, and the physics engine will naturally place them away from each other so they're not inside the same mesh. Here we take a look at the entity itself. There's quite a bit of code inside of this entity. Essentially what it is, though, is every entity is given a input trait based on this number right here, the number of traits. So it's giving input traits into a list. For right now, it's 5. So for 0 through 5, give it an input trait, and then for 0 through 5, give it an output trait. It's given a random color in the range 1 through 9. I've only added 9 colors so far. I'll probably add more later on, or add differing color regions so that you can better determine, what entity is what. They're given a random movement speed, which is how fast they move. They're giving a random seeing distance between 1 unit and 2,000 units. This movement is between 0.1 and 5.9, and that's just per tick how far they move. 5.9 is very fast, 0.1 is very slow. Set can tick is equal to true is saying that they're called a tick function every time they go. And this rest of it is just setting up the shapes of it. It's setting up the meshes, making sure that it has collision. This switch statement here is setting the material to the color that it's been given. So we can go ahead and collapse that. Here we have the triggered input. That essentially returns true or false whether the input is being triggered or not. It's checking for collisions. So for example, if a creature is in front of the entity, so the entity's north vector, I believe, which is positive y. It's sending out a raycast. I won't go through all this code, but essentially it's sending out a raycast, checking if that raycast has hit anything, and if it has hit something, return true. If it hasn't hit anything, return false. This is checking. I think that comment is incorrect, and this is checking multiple different. This is checking all 4 directions. And this one's checking the forward one. So I'll change that comment here soon. But we have forward, we have sideways, left, right, forward, backwards, in all directions. Is it alone is one of these. And then it's just checking around it. It has different input traits. We'll go through the input traits, or those are the input traits that are given to it, 1 through 10. There's 10 of them, or 9 of them. And this is the output. Right now I only have 4 outputs just because there's not really much more to do at this point than forward, backwards, left, and right. So this is moving forward, is moving the X location of the creature forward, moving backwards, and then moving left and right is the Y location. And then begin play is not used here, but it happens when you press play on the game essentially. And then every frame it calls the game loop. The engine itself calls this tick class, and it ticks once per tick. I think they try to hit for 60 ticks a second, but that's not exactly doable at all the time. That's why I have that lag checker in the front with all those balls. Essentially what it does is for everything inside the input traits list, it checks and see if it's true, and if it is true, it executes its output trait. So that's the entities. They're quite complex. There's 10 times 10 times 5, different entities that can spawn. There's a ton of them. But finding the perfect one takes some time. The jump actor is just a lag checker. The game mode base is saying that our character is the rock, essentially. There's nothing else going on there. And then this is the code for the rock. Essentially all this does is let me move forward and backwards, and then it allows me to use commands, and I can show you these commands in here. I won't show you exactly, but if I press 1, I can spawn an entity. I can do that as many times as I want. It's going to automatically tick here every once in a while because that's separate from him. If I press 2, I'll respawn only the items that are inside the green. So I want to keep pressing 2. I can keep doing that. And we can keep spawning entities until there's, millions of them if we wanted to. This is why the lag checker is here. But yeah, so that's that. 3 despawns all creatures and allows us to restart the simulation. And that's all that there is so far. And that is the my player class. So yeah, that's an overview of my code. This is all automated. I've been able to run it for 21,000 generations is what I ran it for once. The perfect entity was simply an entity that could come here, could find, would stop about in the middle here to stop collisions. One of the issues with this is that, as you can see, these spheres are colliding with each other. They're pushing each other around. So even when the perfect entity was spawned, there was only, I'd say 10 to 20 of them at once inside this green circle, which you could probably fit 50 of them in here. And that's because the other entities were spawning and pushing them away from the green circle. So that's just an issue with the code. It might also be an issue with the entity. An entity could develop a trait to where if something is behind it, it pushes back. But the eyesight would have to be lower for that. But there's lots of things I'd love to do here. Food is a big one. I'd love to take it and add some better animations, make them just not balls, have better colors that are defined. Yeah, so that's the entity creator for now. Unreal Engine 5 is in preview. It looks amazing. It's been a ton of fun to work with. Took a lot of time, a very steep learning curve, but now that I think I've done it, it's super cool to learn about. I plan to work a lot more on this project. So thank you very much.